To the extent that we live our lives in a manner that is consistent with the truth in our heart, we thrive.
Welcome to the Meier Clinic's podcast, and you just heard a quote from one of your hosts, Dr. Lisa Day. Join our licensed clinical professionals from various backgrounds as they discuss fascinating mental health topics with a wide range of guests. Meier Clinics is a Christian counseling organization with multiple clinics nationwide dedicated to treating the whole person, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Welcome to our listening family. We thank you for joining us. This is Kristin Sunanta Walker. I am here for another one of our roundtable discussions with Dr. Paul Meier. Paul, thank you for joining us on the show.
It's always my pleasure.
Melanie Van, our program director and counselor. Melanie, thanks for coming on the show as well.
Thank you so much.
And of course, we have our amazing COO, Valerie Quintanilla, joining us too. Hey, Val.
Hey, everyone.
So tonight we're going to talk about something. I'm going to read the Wikipedia description of what it is, so that we can just spell it out for everybody. It's called love addiction, and this is Wikipedia's answer to it. Love addiction is a proposed model of pathological passion-related behavior involving the feeling of being in love. A medical review of related behaviors in animals and humans concluded that current medical evidence does not support an addiction model for maladaptive passion-related behaviors. There's never been a reference to love addiction in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, a compendium of mental disorders and diagnostic criteria published by the American Psychiatric Association. So it is real. It is, I think, a symptom of codependency and other things too. I'm not the clinician here, so I'll shut up right now and I'll just say.
What does love addiction mean in plain English?
Yeah, exactly. So.
That sounded pretty technical.
Yeah, that was pretty darn technical. The reason why this came up for me is because we've done so many shows lately about trauma and sexual abuse, of course, for Mental Health News Radio. So we're going to cover these things. But just within the mental health realm, there is this need that I see among people, and not even just in mental health, where you are constantly looking for that high that you get when you think that you're in love with someone. So that can lead to multiple marriages, multiple relationships, of course, multiple breakups, and, just never finding what it is that you need, because the moment that you get into this new relationship that looks shiny and feels wonderful during that love stage, then you turn around a month later and go, who is this person and why am I here? It never is quite what it's cracked up to be. So that's what I wanted to cover tonight. And I'm gonna pass this over to you, Melanie, first to see, what resonated with you about this particular topic?
Well, I think that people that become love addicted, or we could call them a love addict, have inadequacy feeling whole when they're not with someone else. I think that they probably spend a lot of time very in a chaotic state and may appear desperate. I think people oftentimes, they really are addicted with this first stage of love when they first meet someone, and you have this love rush, but then once they settle into a relationship where most people would start to feel more secure, more safe, and more settled, they start to feel unhappy and insecure. So my thoughts would be there's probably some fear involved. There may be fear of intimacy. So I think there's probably more than one way that you can become a love addict. I think it can be a codependent behavior, or it also could just be a fear of intimacy. But generally, for a person to be like a real love addict, I think their entire life has to revolve around the chase, what they look like, the gym, finding the perfect outfit to wear on a date, just a lot of wooing at the beginning and kind of searching for that perfect one, but then there may never be the perfect one. So I feel like it's just kind of this restless relationship, culture or feeling that they probably live in all the time.
Agreed. Paul, you were not too sure about this particular show, but what are your thoughts now?
No, I love that we're talking about this now.
Okay.
I just needed you, before we started, I need you to help me understand the difference between love addiction and codependency, because love addiction is a type of codependency,
Yes.
but codependency can be dependent on a lot of things, like if your dad was an alcoholic and your husband is bordering on it, or your wife, and you keep encouraging them to be one in subtle ways. That's not a love addiction, that's a codependency area. But a love addiction is where you're codependent in the area of love. And I've shared this case study once before, I believe, on a previous program, but it's the first thing that comes to my mind. That's a perfect example of a love addiction, I think. I treated him years and years ago. I treated a movie star who's intelligent, and she was intelligent. She was beautiful. She was in her 30s, going through her either sixth or her seventh divorce.
Mm.
And she was in a hospital setting, and I was asked to do a consultation on her. So I did a psychiatric workup. She told me, I said, so we started out by talking about the fact that she was suicidal and feeling real depressed. I said, how come? And she said, well, I'm going through my seventh divorce, and there's whatever, we'll say seventh. And I said, well, what was he like? How come you're going through a divorce? Well, he ran around on me repeatedly, and he would brag about it. He didn't even hide it. And if I complained, he would beat me up. And here, why would this, beautiful, intelligent, wealthy movie star put up with that for so long before she finally divorced him? And I said, well, what was your sixth husband like? Well, he was a drug addict, and the seventh one was an alcoholic. The sixth one was a drug addict who ran around on her repeatedly and beat her up. And we went down the line, and she had 7 in a row that when she dated them, she thought they were really nice. She didn't know they were substance abuser. She didn't know that they would be unfaithful to her. She didn't know that they would be abusive. She just thought they were really nice guys. But she'd meet them in a bar or at a party or different places and fall instantly in love. It's like she had unconscious antennas coming out from the back of her head that went zap, I'm in love. And usually after I find out why they're there, I ask them about their childhood. I asked her if I could guess her childhood, and she said, yeah, go ahead. And I said, okay, your dad was probably an alcoholic. Yeah, how'd you know? And I said, I'm just guessing. And your dad ran around on your mom often. And yeah, how'd you know? I said, I'm just guessing. And I said, he probably beat up on your mom and you and the other kids. And yeah, how'd you know? And I said, I'm just guessing. And then I asked her, I said, how old were you when your dad sexually abused you? And she got really mad at me. She says, I never told anybody about that. Who told you that? How did you know that? Did my mother or somebody talk to you? I said, no, I said, I was just guessing. She literally kicked me out of the room and didn't want to talk to me anymore. But then I ended up, the next day, she realized it was true, and she had me come back. And then we ended up having her come to our day program, and we treated her through our day program, where people come 7 hours a day, 5 days a week for 3 or 4 weeks. And it turns out that the reason she had a love addiction. She fell in love, quote unquote. It wasn't love, but she thought it was love. She fell in love with guys that were just like her dad. And we figured out some of the reasons. One was that she wanted to fix her childhood. And one was that she was so bitter toward her dad for abusing her and abusing her mom and all the stuff that he did, that she wanted to marry people like her dad so she could get vengeance on them. Another reason was that I think we're all born with a need to be loved by a mom and a dad and by God. And we need to fulfill those needs. We do need to love and be loved. Nobody really is happy all alone. And we do need to love and be loved. We don't all need to be married. There's people that are single that love and are loved by their friends. So she'd never got a father's love. So she craved the love of her father. So she had crushes on men like her dad. So those were the main reasons. She had crushes on men like her dad because she had a father vacuum. She wanted to get vengeance on her father, and she wanted to fix her father. So she married guys that unconsciously she thought she could fix. But none of this was in her conscious awareness. So that's a typical love addiction.
Interesting. Well, I know from when I thought about this, and I am working with a counselor right now. I'm back in therapy, which I love. I've said on many shows, I go for tune-ups now. And I do have to say this. One of the things that I said in my session yesterday was, you remind me a lot of Dr. Paul Meier. And when I look over at his bookcase, there are some of your books.
Oh, well, he must be a really good counselor then.
He said, wow, thank you.
When are we going to do a program on humility?
Well, I thought about this because I was having a conversation with a new friend of mine that's become a close friend, and their experiences, with always looking for that parent that they were missing from childhood, not the punishment piece. I think were punished more in the relationships. They weren't doing the punishing, but I thought about that with me. I did have that secure attachment with my mother. I didn't have it with my biological father, but I certainly had it with my adoptive father that came in later in life. And I have this long-standing relationship with my ex-husband. So I haven't done the looking for relationship after relationship, but I can tell you in the times when Michael and I, my ex-husband and I, haven't been together, I haven't been actively looking, but there's one male after another that's come in, knocking on the door, wanting romance, and definitely they were love addicts. And I think that they were looking for mother. And that was very painful for me. So I think I've been more on the receiving end of that behavior. And it's not fun on either side. It really isn't. But Valerie, I want to pass this over to you. What are your thoughts on love addiction?
Well, I know that I definitely have. I've heard it say once an addict, always an addict, but which I think is terrible. But I've definitely been on both sides of the spectrum, on the receiving. And we've talked about my childhood many times, but I was looking for, at the time I didn't know, but I was looking for that validation constantly, through relationships, and they weren't authentic because I wanted to mold myself into the person that I thought that the person I was dating wanted me to be,
right?
Or married to, because I've been married a couple of times, and I have no shame in saying that. I would have died a couple of years ago had I admitted that, but part of the authenticity piece has been walking out of the shame of the relationship piece of my life, because that was daunting for me. Like I was mortified of people knowing, that I had been married a couple of times and I'm young and I have one child, and that I've, been a single parent of. And so, I keep going back to this, and I'll continue to go back to this until it's been 5 years. But my awakening moment really was last year. And this is the first year, besides the fact that I needed to heal from narcissistic abuse, specifically my last relationship, which the gentleman that I was dating, I was attracted to because he was a high achiever. We were instantly, connected on a mental level. I won't go into the whole narcissistic piece, but there was some traits about him that I admired because of my father, which I didn't correlate the two until later, but my dad's a very hard worker. There was just a lot of things about him that I viewed as my dad's good traits. And that's typically the kind of, I don't think I have a type, but as far as love addiction, the first thing that I think of is relationships with males for me.
Right.
And then the strained relationship that I've had with my mom and dad, on and off through the years. Those are my beginning thoughts.
Yeah, Paul, when you were talking about, and first of all, brava to you, Valerie, for, this is one of the things when we get this mic in front of people, I tell them, you're going to share your personal stories, so you better get ready. So bravo to you for
Thank you.
Stepping out and being so open, because that's what helps people. We have the clinical view of these things, and then we also have, the real person view of these things. So can we look at this? I want to pass this to you, actually, Melanie. Let's look at this from the side of what it means to be on the receiving end of those kinds of relationships, because obviously you're in the dance too, since you are in the relationship, but to be constantly chased is a bit different than being the constant pursuer. So what do you think about that and what the differences are between the two?
You're asking for the perspective of the person on the other end of the love addict?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to get your heart broken. That's what.
Yeah, as I have.
Really, I mean, exactly, because it is somewhat similar to, I think, narcissistic love bombing, and that this person
Yes.
comes in and everything is romantic and butterflies and rainbows and hearts, and everything seems so intense and happy, and you're both really feeding off each other's energy. And then the normal flow of relationship would be that once things settle down into relationship, then you really start to share intimacy with another person, and you start developing the relationship. But for the person on the receiving end of the love addict, this is when things start to get difficult, and you don't understand why this person isn't responding when things have been so happy and good thus far, or why they're just always unsatisfied. So I would think that in relationship with a love addict would just be extremely exhausting. You're going to probably not understand what you've done wrong in the relationship. There may be little to no communication or real understanding, because I think the love addict probably is a love addict because they're looking for something outside of themselves to have stability. So they're probably not going to be the most stable person themselves,
Right.
generally. And they need that, that intense love relationship to feel alive and feel worthy. And so I feel like the person is probably just not going to be very confident, and it's going to end up being somewhat of a toxic relationship for everyone involved, for sure.
Right. Especially the ones that were married and coming after me. Those were very toxic.
Yeah.
Paul, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts, Paul?
That's an addiction for sure. Yeah, they say, of course, now that the sexes are more similar to each other than they are different, but they say in the past, they'd always say, that men act like they love somebody in order to get sex, and women want to love and be loved, and so they give sex to get love. And both of those are love addictions, when you're pretending to love to get sex, or giving sex just to earn love.
Right.
Those types of things are addictions too.
Absolutely.
But true love, if you really love somebody, I think true love is where you want the best for the other person. You love the other person. You grow to love. You don't just fall instantly in love. That's lust, or some other thing,
or an issue,
or an issue, yeah, or a codependency issue or something. But when you get to know somebody and you grow to love them more and more, the more you get to know them, and you want what's best for them. If you really if you were a man that really loved a woman deeply, then if you honestly thought she'd have a happier life married to somebody else other than you, you'd actually want that. You'd want her to be married to the other guy, even though it would hurt you to lose her, because you'd want what was best for her. So if you love somebody, you want what's best for them, even if it's not you. But
that makes me want to cry. That's Michael.
Yeah.
but when you have a love addiction, you think, I can't live without her.
Right.
These people that when they break up with somebody, they go kill them.
Right.
If you don't stay with me, I'm going to kill you. I love you so much that I'm going to kill you if you don't. That's not love. Good grief. That's the farthest thing in the world from love.
Yeah, there's some new things going on in my life and my relationship with Michael, but it's definitely, I think, a little bit some of my anger towards these males that came in when we weren't together was not directed at my father or my biological father, but definitely directed at, why aren't you as great as Michael? Finally went, yeah, and I couldn't. I can't help it. I mean, he just what you said. We both would want the other person, if he fell in love with someone else and that was what was best for him, I would be so happy for him. He would be happy for me. I think he'd be a lot more sad than I would be. I would just be bewildered. Really? You love someone other than me? What? But I would be happy for him. But yeah, that is a lovely truism, Paul.
Sometimes when things don't work out, it doesn't necessarily mean the other person has a love addiction, because
right.
We all have a level of intimacy that we are comfortable with, and two people meet for the first time that have an attraction, and they start really having a crush on each other, and that does feel wonderful.
Yes.
You know, it feels
Yes.
great. And then if it develops and they grow closer and closer, there's a level of intimacy that each one feels comfortable with. So one of them will stop at that level. You know, when he or she gets to that level of intimacy where they're scared to get closer because they're scared they're going to get hurt. And then the other one wants to keep moving closer and moving closer because maybe they had healthier parents that loved each other and things like that. And then that one feels rejected by the one that's pushing him or her away, and they're really pushing him away just because they're not that comfortable because they came from a rougher background. And I love a song that Paul Simon, you know, young people don't remember Simon and Garfunkel, but
I do.
Old farts my age remember Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel. But there's a song that Paul Simon wrote where in the song he sings, "There's a wall in China 1,000 miles long. To keep the foreigners out, they built it strong. But there's a wall inside me that no one can see, and it takes a long time to get next to me."
Mm.
And that really touches me. You know, that there's a level of intimacy that we're not that it takes a long time to break down those bricks and those walls to get more intimate, and we can do that. Any two people can. So just because it may not seem like it's working out, or you may feel like you're being rejected, you might be getting rejected not because the guy's a love addict or the gal, but and usually it's the guy that's more afraid of intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
But because they just are scared they're going to get hurt. There's a study done on men and women, comparing men to women, and women who are married are 2% happier than women that are single. So women don't really need a man. They can be happy with or without a man. But men who are single, I might have shared this before in a previous program, and I hate the statistic when I read it, but men who are single have 300% more heart attacks, strokes, and suicides than men that are married. So men really need a woman, and I think it's because men are more likely to have those walls like the Wall of China and less likely to share their feelings than a woman. And when you're married, you're sort of forced to get in touch with feelings and share them if you communicate at all. And so it helps men to get healthier to be married to a woman, just because women are a lot healthier than men, I think, on the average when it comes to emotional intimacy and, you know, genuine intimacy and sharing feelings.
This is why we love you, Paul. Men are brain damaged and they don't know.
I feel sorry for myself I'm glad I'm a man, but I feel sorry for myself for being one too.
So your shows, well, I've said this already, and Emily, you can edit this out if you want to, but yeah, Michael is very discerning about what he'll listen to and what he won't. I call him the 3-word man. He can say something completely profound or take a soliloquy that just came out of my mouth and whittle it down to 3 words that are so profound. I'm like, how do you do that? But he says the same thing when he listens to your shows. He's like, now him I like. So Valerie, what are you thinking about sitting over there? Because you and I have been, and we've been bounced around in these things. So what are you thinking about?
Well, I'm really enjoying listening to the conversation because I do have a lot to say. Big surprise. But I've just been thinking back over the years of the relationships that I've been in and how they evolved, and, you know, not necessarily ever equating them to the way that I was raised, because most of my adult life I was, I didn't start real therapy until about 3 or 4 years ago. And, I was one of the persons or people that would go to therapy and be like, okay, I feel better. Don't have to go back, even though it was a half a session. And
it's called a flight into hell. Yeah. Flight into hell.
And quickly get out.
Ironically, the session that I walked out of was, I was probably 30 minutes into it was really a second session with this therapist. And I was describing my childhood, and she said, you do realize that you were sexually molested, just from what I was sharing. And I said, I don't understand this, and I don't understand why I respond like this. And, that right there changed the course of history, for me. but I was a chronic relationship hopper. The extent of my relationships lasted about 2 years, and more recently about a nanosecond. So sitting back and listening, I think of my parents and the fact that they've been married for 50 years. And I think that part of my decision to continue on was definitely outside validation and affirmation, but also seeing an example of the way that my earthly father and my mother have been interacting for so many years. And there was a big, huge piece of me that said I would never be in that position, because my mother's idea of submission is a little bit different than what I think. And and being raised around 3 older brothers, and my dad was very militant, it skewed me just a little bit, to think on both sides. But I would say that I'm definitely, or have been, a love addict. And this past year has been a big growing experience.
You haven't been this year, honey.
Exactly. I'm 1 year narc free.
Yeah.
But seeing the wake of the damage, whether it was me or at the hands of someone else, has been very painful. But there's just a big part of me, and I've told Kristin this, that it's more uncomfortable to try and go back to the discomfort than it is to move forward in the discomfort. I don't, this is the first year, full year that I have not actively sought out any relationships. There's been a few talks here and there, and I've asked the Lord specifically, if this is not meant for me, then please shut the door. And there was a time where I prayed and asked him, if I'm not supposed to be married again, then take the desire away from me, which he never did. So that's pretty much where I not leave the table, but I'll leave it right there, because this could be a whole other show for Valerie.
Well, I'm proud of you. And you were one of the inspirations, as well as myself, for doing this particular show. And Melanie, what great insight about the first thing you said was, well, you're going to get your heart broken.
Yeah.
So
I'll put it in a blender and hit frappe.
Right. Exactly. I feel like I'm very much a mother, obviously. I'm operate that way in many ways. And so these men that have come in and all have issues in some way with mom. Either they're angry at her or they're looking for her and they want that from me. And immediately I'm like, come into my breast and I will help heal you and hold you. And that's my part of the problem. And then I'm like, how in the heck can I get out of this relationship as quickly as possible? This is horrible. I don't like this. This is awful. So, because I've got a company to run and things to do. I didn't ask you to come in. I don't even want you to be here, and I'm fine by myself. Go away. So, Melanie, you've been around while this has gone on. What are your thoughts about what I'm saying? Have I reached some new level of awareness around this, or am I still in some kind of delusional loop?
Hi, this is Dr. Paul Meier of the Meier Clinics. Our Christian counselors across the country have a goal of helping all those who come to us to become what God has called them to be. If you're in a situation where you're not at peace within yourself, or you just feel like there's joy that's missing in your life, we can come alongside to help you obtain peace and joy.
This message is sponsored by the Meier Clinic Foundation, a nonprofit Christian counseling ministry. The number is 1-888-7-CLINIC, 1-888-7-CLINIC.
Well, you're my boss and write my paychecks. I'm not going to tell you you're delusional. I'm playing. I mean, honestly, this could be a whole other show, just like Valerie was saying, but a relationship that someone has with their mother is very different than the relationship you would have with a partner, because a mother, your job is to be unconditional, and your boundaries are different with a mother-son or mother-daughter relationship, and then they're going to be different than they are in a love relationship. So I also think that maybe sometimes being a mother figure is your wall. That's just what I'll say, because it would block you from having more intimacy. But yet, if you are that mother, which you're very much a mother figure to all of us, I've talked with Emily about that, and I've probably talked to, I think Valerie has mentioned it too. You take care of all of us, and we love that. And that's part of why we love you. We love you so much. But
you're a very loving person.
yes, very, very much so. And who wouldn't seek that?
Right.
Who wouldn't seek someone that's very loving? So it doesn't have to be something that's dysfunctional and people are seeking you out, but there is something very natural and giving that you give to others, and you allow people to be in a space where they can just be themselves. So I would imagine men that may be in relationships with others that may not be in good relationships would be very drawn to you, because you create that space where they can be safe and they can just be themselves. So I think it's probably a lot more complicated than just bringing, a mother, them trying to seek their mother in you or something like that. I think it's more complicated than that. And I know you, and I know that you don't trust, just like I don't, I trust no one. Even no one. So, I just think it's complicated, but I just think people are naturally drawn to others that are light and are forgiving. And I think better boundaries sometimes would just help you be able to move on. And then we could go whole, this could just be counseling for Kristin on air, I guess. But
no, we've done enough of that.
I'm just
trying to give examples of
examples.
So
exactly.
Yeah.
I was definitely I was in a lot of relationships. My relationships generally last a really long time, though. From the time I was 14 until I was in my late 20s, I was pretty much in a relationship, plus or minus a few months. But these were long, 5-year relationships that I was in. And some could call that a love relation, a love addict. But really, it would just get to the point in the relationship where the person would want to be much more serious, i.e. be engaged or spend the rest of their life with me. And I was just so young, it wasn't what I wanted. And so I would just kind of move on to the next one, but never was real comfortable in just kind of sitting by myself and finding my own happiness. I think I found a lot of happiness, and it was a distraction for me. Relationships were distractions because, I grew up in a home with a brother that was an addict and had all the other family issues that we had with abuse. So relationships were very much a distraction and a way for me to escape. So when I was out of relationship, all these things would start piling in, which was very uncomfortable for me. So having worked through that and dealing with those things on your own can be really difficult. So just like Paul was saying, there's all sorts of different reasons why people do the things that they do. And I do think there's subconscious. And then I just wanted to share a little story about what Paul said. And that is when you really love someone, you want what is best for them. And I was in a relationship, my college years, my undergraduate years, with a young man, and we dated for 5.5 years. And I followed him around 2 colleges, and he got into med school, and I ended up ending the relationship. And part of it was just for that reason.
Why?
Because I just, Paul, you don't know my backstory, but when I was 17, I went to court, took an uncle to court that had abused my brother and I from the time we were about 5 to 10. He molested both of us. And anyway, so around that time in my life, we lost everything we had. We grew up on a big farm with this family, and my entire life changed. And I was really trying to work on my problems. And here he was going into medical school, and I could kind of feel myself just being put into a role of being, I guess, doctor's wife, or he was very uncomfortable living in my darkness. And I knew I had a lot of it, and I kept trying to deal with it and have him support me, but he just couldn't. He just didn't have the maturity. We were just both really young. And in my mind, all I could think was, he'll be so much better off with some pretty little nurse and not someone with all these problems. And so because he had this simple life, very little problems, maybe some perfectionism and OCD that runs through his family, but just very simple. There's no drama, no trauma or anything in his family. So I just walked away from the relationship, really thought I was kind of doing him a favor, never stopped loving the guy. Well, now it's 20 years later. I'm divorced, he's divorced, and we're dating again. Love him the same as I did back then.
Maybe it'll work out this time.
Maybe, but here's the thing, Paul.
And what you thought about yourself back then
is very different now. It's
false.
It was
Look
false.
who you've become. Look who you've become.
Yes.
I mean, I think you're wonderful. I mean, I think you're extremely intelligent, loving, interesting person. And whoever ends up with you
is
Could
one
be a very,
lucky
very,
man.
Very lucky.
fortunate man.
But here's the thing. I loved him so much at the time that I just didn't think I could be the person that I needed to become if I stayed with him, because he just made everything so good, and I just, something in me knew that I couldn't become this person that I needed to be. It was just like a higher calling in my life, and it really hurt me. I never got over it. He never got over it. And now we're together again, but it's a long distance relationship. So I am about 2.5 hours away. He is a doctor now and works as a program director and has his own patients and has very much established his life. He has 2 children that he has full custody of that are very much settled into a school system. My kids are very much settled here in their school system, and neither one of us really wants to move. And for the longest time, I was like, you've got to make a change. Like, I have this autistic son. He's got his treatment team here. My boy's dad is here. I don't want to pull them away from their dad. His ex-wife is not involved at all with the children anymore. It's just kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. And so for the longest time, I was like, someone has to make a move. I can't make a move back down to that area. I really need you to come this way. Well, now I've kind of come to the conclusion again that when I really think about it, I'm like, I can't ask him to do it. I can't ask him to leave everything that he's worked for, uproot his children, just to come up here and be with me. So now we're just kind of at this standstill. He wants what's best for me. I want what's best for him. So it's just.
I'll butt in here for a second. To say my prejudiced opinion. is that if there's a chance for genuine, deep love between 2 mature people,
yes,
then where either of you lives is trite and irrelevant. It's almost compared to the need to love and be loved by somebody genuine.
Yes,
it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant, and we're not here to do therapy on the radio for everybody to listen to. But I would advise, if you guys are falling deeper and deeper in love, and it's a healthy love, I would advise either of you to be willing to make the change.
Yeah.
Well, this is good, because Melanie having to sit and listen to a bunch of people giving her compliments was fascinating for me to witness.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable in that space for sure. However, I have worked hard for it. I've worked really hard for it. So yeah, I mean, love is what makes the world go round. I mean, have we all seen Wonder Woman? Paul, you probably haven't seen Wonder Woman, have you?
I haven't seen it.
Oh,
No,
you need to go
yet.
see it.
It's all about love.
I heard it's good.
It's all about love.
Really good.
Yeah, it really is. And so one can see how easily you would get addicted to it, but romantic love and then lasting love are different things. So
yeah, I like. Yeah. I like what you say about that, Paul, about, that over time and that authentic. I just had someone tell me the other day, if this is what do you know how many people would love to have what you have and have had? And I'm like, yeah, okay, it wasn't always perfect, but what partnership is. But it's true. I feel very blessed.
I love statistics. I'm always quoting statistics.
We love your statistics.
Me too.
And one study I read showed that in the United States, 1 out of 5 people love their job and 4 out of 5 wish they were doing something different. And 1 out of 5 married people love, honestly, when they wouldn't say that in front of their mate. They would lie in front of their mate, but 1 out of 5 when they're asked privately whether they really love who they married, only 1 out of 5 are happy with who they married, and 4 out of 5 wish they would have either not married that person or married somebody else. So that means 1 out of 25 people in the United States love their job and their mate. So if you're fortunate,
kind of a sad commentary.
If you're fortunate, I know. So that's why there's so many miserable people in the United States, but if and around the world. But if you are fortunate, if you who are listening and our listening family, if any of you are fortunate enough to love the job you have and love the person that you're married to, if you're married, then you're a real fortunate person. You're the 1 in 25. You're in the 4%.
Wow.
5%.
So
That's such a low percent.
It is.
That's such a low percent.
4%. 4%.
Yeah. Wow. The whole time we're talking, I'm sitting here thinking about these dating apps. This is another show. This could have been the fun show. We'll have to educate Paul on dating apps like Tinder and until he understands this. But I mean, my goodness, talk about encouraging love addiction. I mean, you can literally just sit on your phone and turn it on and say, hey, there's 20 people within a 5-mile radius of me that I could have a date with right now. And if that one doesn't work out, then an hour later I can have a date with someone else. I mean, it's amazing what our culture has come to. And I just feel like we're getting further and further away from what we really need in life. It's instant gratification.
Yeah. And real love, real intimate love is not.
But meeting people in that way can end up in a good way too.
True.
Yes, it
true.
can. Sure. I have friends that it has, for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have too, but I've also been rejected from eHarmony, which I just had to share.
You were rejected?
They won't let
I
you
got
in.
rejected. No, I didn't just get rejected once.
Are you serious?
I got rejected twice. So Kristin and I were talking about this the other day, and she was like, "What?"
Wow.
So I pulled up this article because I Google searched. I was so upset, and I thought, "There's no." And of course, my family just had a heyday with it. You know, my brother's like, "It's a Christian dating website." He's like, "Oh, Jesus was trying to tell you something." But it happened, and I'm like, "No way!" And then it happened again. And so I Googled it, and there's a lady on there on the internet that wrote a whole story about her experience with it, and she's now happily married, but it became a joke, you know, and she talks about, I guess it's algorithm that they measure, you know, when people are inputting their answers, and if there's anything that's not normal, you know, because a lot of people that go in and take those tests, well, you know, how many of them are 100% true, you know, when they go in and they answer. And so I answered completely honestly on the test.
Scared the heck out of him.
Oh yeah. I'm like, well, if he makes me mad, I'm going to punch him. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't put that. But, you know, she was talking about how, you know, she basically proved the system wrong because, you know, it's based off of all these different tech things that I don't understand. And so apparently I was very, very out of the box for their taste. And so, yes, I got the polite decline twice. So not that I did on other, you know, because I did try online dating for a very short period of time, and it was awful, you know, and I just said, I'm never doing this again. First of all, I felt like a creeper going through the profiles, and then ended up getting into arguments through email. And I thought, this is draining. This is not even worth it. You know, everybody fast forwards the old school part of getting to know that person because they've already given an explanation of who they think that they are and who they think that you want them to be, you know, and then pretty much they cross out what they don't want. I mean, it's in bold, like, you know, this is a breaker. This is a breaker.
Deal
and
breaker.
I thought, okay, this is a deal breaker, is being on here. Delete. So anyway,
what would you say, Paul, would be a way to deal with being someone who's addicted to love? What would be a recommended treatment protocol?
Therapy. You know, seeing a really wise counselor who understands codependency.
Right.
One who, you know, I think 80% of our thoughts, feelings, and motives are unconscious. They're out of our conscious awareness. And 20% of the reason we make the decisions we do are conscious. And we think that the decisions we make are totally in our conscious awareness, but they're not, you know, and who you marry is 80% for reasons that you don't know and 20% for reasons that you do know, if you get married at all. And so when you get therapy, a good therapist will dig and probe and study your body language and you know, every time every time your father comes up, for example, you look down at the floor, quit having eye contact, and your pupils dilate, and you fold your arms, you know, or every time the topic of sex comes up, you put pillows, you grab a pillow and put it on your lap, and you don't even know you're doing it.
Interesting.
You know, you know, you can learn as much about a person from their body language as you can from what they're saying, but a good therapist can dig and probe and dig stuff out of the unconscious and say, have you ever thought, this might be true, or that might be true, because it keeps coming up, in the things that you're sharing, and you have those aha responses and you grow. And so the more you become aware of your unconscious, the more control you have over your life and the wiser decisions you make when it comes to relationships. Right. Instead of falling into your love dependency, your love addiction.
Right.
You'll make conscious love, healthy love choices.
Well, I tell you, I keep knowing where I go back to. The things that, the very shallow things that you think are important when you're younger. Well, how does this person's behavior, is it a reflection on me? And just all the stupid things that we think are so important when we're young, and age and wisdom and heartbreak beat the heck out of all that, hopefully, and you come back around to, okay, this person really sees me and really loves me, and I feel the same about them, and we have this long history, maybe even children together, but I agree that, and I love those statistics about men versus women. There are plenty of women out there that end up, their husband passes away or they go through a divorce and they never get into another relationship. They stay single and they live long, fruitful lives. But men usually, bam, the minute that ink on the paper is dry, they are running to the other side of the courthouse to get married to somebody else.
My mom and dad loved each other deeply and were married for like 60 years or so until my dad died. But I mean, when they were in their 80s, I went over to their apartment and walked in. I had a key, and I walked in on them, and they were sitting on the living room couch kissing, and I said, "You're too old for that." And they said, "Oh, no, we're not." And they would watch TV every night next to each other, holding hands, and so I had that model that made me want that kind of healthy love that they had for each other, and people can have that. I know people can have that, and I feel like I've got that in my own marriage.
Absolutely,
you can have that, but not everybody has to be married.
Nope.
And you can love your friends and even love dating people, and have healthy dating relationships, and be real happy whether you're married or not married. And I think, as far as God is concerned, I think God gives you a choice. I don't think, I was invited to, if you're a Presbyterian, for those of you who are Presbyterians, please forgive me for what I'm about to say. But if you're a Presbyterian, everything is God's will. Like a Presbyterian falls down the steps and brushes themselves off and says, "Thank God that's over with," because you think it must have been ordained, And so I spoke. I was invited to speak at a Presbyterian church before, and I talked about choices that people make, and it was it was people in their 20s, that I spoke to. So I talked to them about marriage and things like that, and they were taught that God picks out somebody for you and makes sure that you end up with that person that He picked out for you. And I just don't believe that. I think sometimes that happens, it happened in the Bible a couple times, but that doesn't mean it happens as a rule. And I think most people end up marrying somebody for sick reasons more often than healthy reasons. So I think God leaves it up to you whether to marry or not marry, but He tells us not to be unequally yoked together. And so He wants somebody that's a healthy match for you spiritually and emotionally. And so I think He gives us the choice of who to marry or who not to marry, or whether to marry or whether not to marry.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I like ending on that note because I think it gives people hope. You get yourselves into therapy and work on, what it is you think you're needing to find in somebody else that is a gaping wound or a gaping, the well that can never be filled that lives within you. And, Paul, you said it on other shows. One of the things I love that you said was, you kept getting, I don't remember the words you used, but let's say frustrated that, my spouse is supposed to fulfill all my needs. And then you finally realize, well, No, she isn't. I can go do that.
Yeah. If you marry, let me reiterate that. That's really an important point. That if you marry somebody to meet all your needs, then that's a love addiction. That's an unhealthy relationship. If you marry somebody because you love them and want what's best for them, and they love you, want what's best for you, and then you'll end up meeting some of each other's needs. But nobody can meet all of your needs, and you can't meet all of your mate's needs. And you need to meet your own needs. Be independent. If you need something that your mate can't provide you, find a healthy way to meet your own need. I'm not saying go run around with somebody else,
right?
But I'm saying find a healthy way to meet your own need. And so be responsible to meet your own needs, and whatever needs your mate happens to meet for you, that's a bonus.
Absolutely. I think for those that are constantly seeking that out and have been in relationship after relationship, time alone and therapy is probably the best medicine. And those that are constantly running away from relationships, possibly some medicine would be also therapy. And you don't always have to run. What's that about? What are you afraid of? What's the intimacy issue there? So you might need to take a leap or go back to someone who was wonderful that's been sitting and waiting for you. You never know what can happen. But I know we were all tired tonight because it's been a long day. Something must be in the air today because we all had very long, stressful days, except for Valerie. Valerie got to see Wonder Woman. So yay for Valerie.
That was the most amazing movie that I know that I've seen. Blake and I really enjoyed it.
Yes, it's
and thank you, Kristin.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. So thank all of you for coming on the show and talking about this oft misunderstood topic.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Thank you also to our listeners for another edition of Mental Health News Radio. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. Tune in next time for another engaging discussion on relevant mental health topics. If you have any questions about Meier Clinics, please visit our website at meierclinics.com. That's MEIER clinics.com, or call us at 888-7-CLINIC. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or any of your favorite podcast apps. And please note that we are a member of and produced by Mental Health News Radio Network, MHNRnetwork.com.